I love JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and that's something I thought I would never say. When I originally reviewed it, thanks to a recommendation from Condifiction, I gave it a middling review. My issues with it were purely subjective, but nonetheless they still hampered my enjoyment of the show. But when Satsuki the Savage and Everything Animated, my King of Anime podcast co-host, go check it out, links in the description, suggested I give it another shot, I reluctantly obliged. What I was met with is what I wanted JoJo to be when I first watched Season 1 all those days ago. So let's get into it, and here is why I now love JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and my first impressions of Stardust Crusaders.
Jotaro!
Shut up! Get out of my face, you bitch!
And firstly, there's the opening scene to this anime where Jotaro is in a jail cell as he believes his stand, which is explained by Joseph later on as a physical manifestation of one's fighting spirit, is trying to possess him. So to demonstrate this, he steals one of the police officer's guns and tries to shoot himself in the head, but the stand doesn't let him do it and stops the gun from dealing any damage. I'm not sure about you guys, but that is so much more memorable than the introduction of Jonathan Joestar. This scene is both comedic gold and at the same time, it's a great way to explain a big part of the story with the introduction of stands. And the reason it's so funny is because Jojo just refuses to leave this cell because he absolutely believes he is possessed. And when his grandfather comes to smooth things over, it just adds up into this great and memorable scene introducing a lot of these great characters that will be in a major role in this series. And as well, this scene really was for Jotaro, and what an introduction to give him. So let's actually talk about a little bit more of Jotaro and his personality.
I told you, I've got an evil spirit, and sometimes it likes to bring me things.
Jotaro is an absolute dick, but he's a lovable dick, and one you'd want to take care of and nurture and never let it go or let it get dirtied. That's a way to say that. I mean, let's take for example when the fake captain in episode 6 tells him to stop smoking, he calls him a prick and an ass. Jotaro just does not care, and that is one of the many great things about his character. Another example is all the times when girls come up to him and start hitting on him. Always, and this never gets old, he always finds it annoying that they're bothering him. Which in another sense is how he treats his mother, Holly, but he kind of lets those girls off the hook easy, whereas he calls his poor mother a bitch instead of, well, her actual name. What's even more hilarious about this is that he's convinced that Holly is smothering him with too much affection, but when you actually see what Holly does to him, yeah, she babies him a little bit, but she's actually just a really good and caring mother. It's a really nice subversion of expectations because, well, I don't have to tell you about all of those mother-con tropes, do I?
I'm glad you finally left that awful jail cell.
Why are you such an annoying bitch?
Okay, I don't know.
And while I was describing Jotaro, it came to mind that on paper, Jotaro isn't just a dick in this show. I mean, he sounds mean for doing these things on paper, but he never really comes off as just being a dick. So it got me thinking about how the show actually takes the negative trait in normal people, being a dick, because nobody likes a dude who hates their mom or is always a dick, and turns it into a positive trait for him. Well, I think it's two things that are playing in tandem. For one, the show's absurdity is the main factor here. The show isn't just about absurd fights, it's also about absurd people, and because of the absurdity, they are also in turn absurd themselves. The second is actually Holly.
I just had the most amazing connection with my son right now. Jotaro must be thinking about me at school this very second.
I'm not thinking about you.
Holly is the complete opposite of what Jotaro and the show, in theory, kind of represents. Jotaro is an 18-year-old specimen. Yeah, well, he doesn't look like a teenager, so we'll use that word. And Joseph is the same. They're both these absurd characters, and yeah, I've used that word a million times in this video, but it's true. They're both very outlandish. Holly is just a really awesome mom who tries to coddle Jotaro a little bit too much sometimes, but she's mostly just a regular person who wants the best for her son. And you can also tell where she learned this attitude from, which is Joseph himself, who constantly does the same kind of thing to Holly that Holly does to Jotaro. This is an example of, I guess, JoJo's subtle storytelling, which is something they do with little character bits like that. While the show is largely about in-your-face humor and 80s shonen tropes and a lot lot of fighting and largely isn't a very subtle anime, it still pulls it off from time to time. But getting back to Holly, I think there are also a plethora of other reasons why I personally like her so much besides her status as best mom.
You all right?
Yay! I'm fine! Thank you!
Like I said earlier, charisma is not an issue in this series, but you can't not mention that in the chemistry Holly has with the main cast. Like I mentioned earlier, she is so normal compared to everyone else, and that lets her character flourish in the background. They let her become this really lovable and endearing character who plays a kind of middle ground to really ease in and lighten the mood, but also to create stakes. While she is so normal, she gels so well because she is in a role that just can't be filled by Joseph or Jotaro so easily. She's the show's most grounded character, and because of that, the audience is able to connect with her very easily, which is important, and that's because the main plot centers around Holly because her stand starts to manifest. But her stand has put her in danger, and in 50 days, she may die. So Joseph and Jotaro have no choice but to find the person who caused this to happen to her, which of course is Dio Brando, that asshole. And I personally am totally okay with this. I didn't like Dio at all in the original series as I felt the character wasn't interesting enough. Yeah, he had that one meme about him go viral, but memes aren't a substitute for character depth, which is something Dio never really had. I'm interested to see going forward how they go about developing Dio. I hope he has better writing and development in this series, as it would be one of the last things on my list of things this series has completely made me 180 on. But I can't not mention the old man Joseph Joestar, the son of Jonathan Joestar, the show's original protagonist in many ways. But what can you say, this guy is freaking hilarious and awesome. Whenever Joseph sees one of those flesh tentacles, he squirms like a little girl, which is something that makes his character unique from the others. Joseph isn't just a brooding badass, he has this weird side to him, like, for example, how he babies Holly all the time. But he is still powerful and knowledgeable enough, though, which is something to expect from a Joestar. Without Joseph's experience, Jotaro would still be in jail, and Holly, well, I'd rather not think about that. Joseph Joestar, not bad character in this anime, not bad at all.
Come on, Jotaro! Just destroy the damn thing!
Quit your bitching, old man.
While writing the script for this video, and with the constant hours I've sunk into it with rewrites and rewatches of episodes that it took, there is something I noticed that I think we sometimes lose track of, and something that Jojo is a prime example of. In anime, you have to have good writing for your characters, you just do. Season 1, and I'm absolutely in the majority when I say this, so realize this is a completely subjective and personal opinion before you get your pitchforks and try to poke me really hard, had really shoddy character writing for me. Oh, you guys are sharpening those pitchforks, aren't you? Not that there weren't well-written characters. I really enjoyed characters like Lisa and Robert E.O. Speedwagon. Not only are they references to songs and bands I grew up with, but they're written well and consistent, and that's a key word I'd like to replace absurd with for a moment. Season 1 didn't feel consistent. Dio, Jonathan Joestar, these are your main characters, which should have blew me away. Sadly, they not only didn't live up to the massive expectations set forth, whether wrongfully or rightfully, but there was such a large disconnect that it made me consider never actually watching this series again. But Stardust Crusaders is an example of everything right about JoJo, everything I wanted it to be, and in some places it even overexcelled. Yes, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is extremely overrated and not as good as people will make it out to be, but at least so far with Stardust Crusaders, it's on track to changing my mind about how I thought of the series before. In a span of 2 episodes, I went from hating JoJo to absolutely loving the series. So to those like me who didn't like Season 1, and there are a few out there, they're just not very vocal about it because they know what that entails, give this a shot. I'd say by the end of episode 1, you'll like it enough, and by episode 2, you'll be a believer like myself. So there it is, my first impressions of Stardust Crusaders. Tell me what you think about the series below, if you disagree with me or not, and if you're new, hit the subscribe button and ring the bell, as well check out some of these videos if they find your fancy. Bye bye.